Over $60 million worth of advanced Russian tanks destroyed by just 1,000 drones. In just 12 minutes, over 40 vehicles lay in ruins and more than 300 Russian soldiers were hit. An ambush that startled NATO analysts. How did Ukraine execute one of the most devastating strikes of the war against a force that many considered unstoppable? Ukraine's ingenious trap ambushed even Russia's elite, revealing vulnerabilities in traditional armored warfare. The scale and speed of the destruction left military observers questioning how such a well-equipped division could be dismantled so quickly. To understand how this unfolded, we need to examine the reputation and mindset of the Russian forces that led the assault. The overconfidence of Russia's 4th Guards Tank Division. Renowned since World War II, the 4th Guards Tank Division still epitomized Cold War armored doctrine. Armies of nearly 200 T-80 main battle tanks and BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles backed by modern artillery, primed to smash through defences. This legacy of battlefield dominance shaped their posture and mindset as they approached Kharkiv in June 2024. The division's history of honours and elite status, earned through decades of high-profile operations, fostered a belief in their own invincibility. That confidence, however, would become a liability. The division's operational plan reflected this mindset. Russian High Command tasked the 4th Guards with a decisive push to seize Syrkuni, a strategic village northeast of Kharkiv. Capturing this area would disrupt Ukrainian supply lines and force defenders to abandon forward positions. The plan assumed the division's sheer power. Its armoured columns and disciplined formations would be enough to overcome any resistance. This was not a force preparing for a contested advance. It was a unit expecting to roll forward with minimal disruption. Their deployment was textbook in its discipline and scale. Satellite imagery showed long, orderly columns of T-80 tanks leading the way, flanked by BMP-2s and supported by mobile artillery and anti-aircraft systems. Reconnaissance elements moved ahead to scout potential threats, while the main body followed established routes. The division's approach resembled a classic demonstration of overwhelming force, a method rooted in the traditions of Soviet-era mechanized warfare. The assumption, mass, momentum, and firepower would break any opposition. This approach revealed the division's reliance on doctrine developed for a different era. The 4th Guards tactics emphasized direct engagement, flanking maneuvers, and rapid breakthroughs, methods that had worked against conventional adversaries. Their columns advanced along predictable routes, relying on open roads and visible assembly areas, confident that their armour and numbers would protect them from attack. The division's movements were deliberate and methodical, but also exposed, shaped by the belief that their reputation and hardware alone could secure victory. Yet the modern battlefield had changed. Precision, adaptability, and the integration of new technology now defined successful operations. The 4th Guards' confidence in established procedures left them vulnerable to adversaries who understood how to exploit predictability. Ukrainian forces, well versed in hybrid warfare and asymmetric tactics, recognized the division's patterns. Their preparations focused on turning the Russian strengths into liabilities. The division's flanking maneuvers and probing attacks followed familiar patterns, seeking to stretch Ukrainian defenses and expose weak points. Traditionally, such tactics would force defenders to disperse and yield ground. In this case, however, Ukrainian planners anticipated the approach and engineered the terrain into a complex network of traps. The area ahead of the Russian advance was saturated with mines, concealed anti-tank positions, and monitored by persistent drone surveillance. The 4th Guards, advancing as if facing a conventional enemy, were in fact moving into a zone designed to neutralize their advantages. Drone footage later revealed the vulnerabilities in the Russian approach. Columns of T-80s and BMP-2s moved along exposed roads, their positions easily tracked and targeted. There was little deviation from established routes, and no evidence of adapting to the threat of aerial reconnaissance or precision-guided munitions. The division's reliance on massed armour and firepower, once a source of strength, now made them conspicuous and susceptible to attack from above and from concealed positions. For the 4th Guards, the Kharkiv operation was more than a tactical setback. It was a confrontation with the limits of their legacy. Their elite status brought with it expectations of decisive action and battlefield dominance. Yet the realities of modern warfare demanded a different approach, one that prioritized flexibility and innovation over tradition. The division's overconfidence, shaped by decades of success and reinforced by a culture of prestige, left them unprepared for the kind of threat they faced in Ukraine. The destruction that followed was not simply the result of a single miscalculation. It was the product of systemic overconfidence and a failure to adapt to changing conditions. The 4th Guards Tank Division, once a symbol of Russian military power, became an example of how legacy and reputation can obscure critical vulnerabilities. Their advance into Kharkiv was not just a test of strength, but a lesson in the consequences of underestimating a prepared and innovative adversary. What unfolded next would demonstrate the full extent of Ukraine's tactical ingenuity as the battlefield shifted from a contest of brute force to a carefully orchestrated trap. The trap, Ukraine's tactical masterstroke. The 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade, fresh from liberating Trostianets when the 4th Guards retreated, brought the same ingenuity to the northern approaches of Kharkiv. Their reputation for adaptability and combat effectiveness was built on years of experience and a modern structure integrating mechanized infantry, artillery, and specialized drone units. In the weeks prior, the brigade's UAV teams, particularly the Black Raven and Seneca units, had refined their tactics, employing drones not only for reconnaissance, but also as precision strike assets. This combination of deep institutional knowledge and technological innovation set the stage for what would become a textbook ambush. The plan centered on drawing the Russian armored column into a pre-selected engagement zone. Rather than meeting force with force, the 93rd Brigade staged a controlled withdrawal, presenting the appearance of a faltering defense. Ukrainian units relinquished forward positions in a methodical retreat, leaving clear routes open to entice the 4th Guards deeper into the countryside. This apparent weakness was carefully choreographed, with every movement calculated to encourage the Russians to accelerate their advance and commit more assets to the push. The terrain north of Kharkiv offered natural choke points, narrow roads hemmed by forests and fields, that could be exploited to channel the Russian column. Ukrainian engineers and infantry worked in tandem to reinforce these bottlenecks. Defensive layers were constructed, mines were buried across the main access points, while concealed anti-tank guided missile teams set up firing positions in the tree lines and abandoned structures. Overhead, drone reconnaissance provided continuous updates, mapping Russian movement and confirming the optimal moment for engagement. The layered defenses funneled the armored column into a tightly controlled kill zone where every vehicle's location was known before the first shot was fired. The most significant innovation came from the brigade's dedicated drone units. Black Raven and Seneca operators positioned FPV drones in concealed launch sites along the anticipated route. These drones, equipped with shaped charges and guided by live video feeds, could be launched at a moment's notice to strike exposed tank hatches, ammunition trucks, or command vehicles. The drones functioned as both forward observers and attack platforms, relaying targeting data to artillery batteries and anti-tank teams. This integration of drone surveillance with traditional firepower allowed for real-time adjustments as the Russian column advanced. Coordination was essential. In the days before the ambush, the brigade's engineers and UAV teams worked to ensure that the decoy retreat routes appeared clear of obstacles, while secondary roads were seeded with mines and other traps. Every element was synchronized. As Russian reconnaissance probed ahead, they found no visible signs of resistance or fortification, reinforcing the illusion of a withdrawal. Meanwhile, the real-time intelligence gathered by drones allowed Ukrainian planners to anticipate Russian decisions, adjusting their own deployments to maximize the ambush's effectiveness. Psychological manipulation played a central role. The apparent ease with which the 4th Guards advanced increased their confidence, making them less vigilant for hidden threats. The column's logistics-heavy composition, with supporting vehicles interspersed among tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, suggested a force preparing for rapid exploitation rather than a contested fight. This mindset left them particularly vulnerable to a sudden, multi-directional attack. As the Russian column entered the engagement zone, Ukrainian forces remained concealed and silent. Black Raven and Seneca drones circled overhead, streaming live video to command posts and artillery crews. Anti-tank teams tracked the lead and trailing vehicles, ready to initiate the ambush at the signal. The kill zone was tightly packed. Any attempt at retreat or maneuver would force vehicles off the mined roadways and into additional hazards. The entire operation was a demonstration of modern combined arms tactics, fusing engineering, deception, and technology. The brigade's ability to coordinate drones, anti-tank teams, and artillery in a single, synchronized engagement reflected a level of battlefield awareness and adaptability that few conventional units could match. The Russians, advancing according to doctrine and expecting little resistance, were instead funneled into a space where every advantage was held by the defenders. The stage was set. With the Russian formation compressed and exposed, Ukrainian forces waited for the precise moment to strike. The ambush that shattered the column, the ambush that shattered the 4th Guards Tank Division, began with a sudden, violent detonation. As the lead tank rolled forward, it struck a mine placed precisely in the roadway. The resulting explosion sent debris skyward and immediately halted the advance. The rest of the column, tightly packed on the narrow route, ground to a stop behind the crippled vehicle. In seconds, the division's momentum evaporated, and dozens of armoured vehicles were trapped in a confined space with no room to manoeuvre. Before Russian crews could react, Ukrainian FPV drones launched from concealed positions. These drones, operated by specialised teams, targeted the front and rear of the convoy with precision. The lead tank, already immobilised, was hit again, its hatch blown open by a shaped charge. Simultaneously, drones struck the last vehicles in the column, igniting fuel and ammunition. With both ends of the convoy destroyed, the Russian force was locked in place, unable to advance or retreat. Within minutes, some 40 armoured vehicles lay wrecked and more than 300 Russian troops were killed or wounded. Inside the kill zone, confusion set in. Russian radio transmissions captured by Ukrainian intelligence revealed panic as commanders realized the extent of their predicament. Orders dissolved into desperate calls for support. Infantry dismounted and scattered, seeking cover in the surrounding woods. But the open terrain and persistent drone surveillance offered little protection. Attempts to regroup or break out met immediate resistance, with mines and additional drone strikes targeting any movement outside the main road. Ukrainian artillery, positioned at a distance and guided by real-time drone feeds, opened fire on the immobilized column. High explosive shells landed with accuracy, tearing through armored hulls and igniting secondary explosions as ammunition cooked off inside the vehicles. The barrage was relentless, designed to maximize destruction and prevent any organized response. From above, drone cameras recorded the devastation: burning wrecks, scattered debris, and Russian soldiers caught in the open, unable to find shelter from the continuous bombardment. Efforts by the Russian troops to mount a defense quickly unraveled. Deprived of mobility and with their communications disrupted, the division could not coordinate a counterattack. Some soldiers abandoned their vehicles and weapons, attempting to escape on foot. Others huddled behind the twisted remains of tanks, waiting for an assault that came from every direction. The psychological impact was immediate. Survivors described a sense of helplessness as drones hovered overhead, directing artillery fire with unerring accuracy and striking isolated targets with little warning. The destruction of the column underscored the vulnerability of traditional armoured tactics when faced with modern asymmetric warfare. The reliance on massed armour and predictable movement left the 4th Guards exposed to a layered defence built on deception, terrain exploitation, and technological innovation. The low cost and flexibility of FPV drones proved decisive, transforming the battlefield and neutralizing the advantages of expensive main battle tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. As the smoke cleared, the scale of the ambush became evident. Over 40 Russian vehicles were reduced to twisted metal, and more than 300 soldiers were dead or wounded. The survivors who managed to flee or surrender spoke of the relentless precision of the Ukrainian attack and the sense that there was no escape once the trap was sprung. The psychological toll extended beyond the immediate casualties. eroding confidence in armored operations and sowing doubt among Russian commanders about the viability of their tactics. The aftermath of the ambush offered a stark lesson. Sheer force and reputation were no longer guarantees of battlefield success. The operation by the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated how a combination of mines, drones, and coordinated artillery could dismantle even the most prestigious armored formation. The event forced a reassessment of conventional doctrines and exposed the risks inherent in relying on legacy tactics against an adaptable opponent. The impact of this engagement did not end with the destruction of the column. The scale and speed of the Ukrainian victory reverberated far beyond the battlefield, prompting military analysts and defense planners worldwide to reconsider long-held assumptions about armored warfare. The shockwaves from Kharkiv would soon reach command centers across the globe, raising urgent questions about the future of military strategy and the balance of power in modern conflict. The global military shockwave. The events outside Kharkiv forced military analysts worldwide to confront a new operational reality. The destruction of the 4th Guards Tank Division was not just a tactical defeat for Russia. It was a demonstration of how conventional armored forces can be rendered ineffective by modern, asymmetric tactics. A few $100s in drones neutralized assets worth millions, an economic shock that NATO planners are racing to understand. The cost imbalance was stark. Vehicles representing decades of investment and industrial capacity were eliminated by small, rapidly produced platforms. This single engagement underscored the vulnerability of traditional armored columns and exposed gaps in doctrines that had shaped global military planning for generations. NATO's response was immediate. Intelligence briefings and after-action reports circulated quickly among member states, dissecting the details of Ukraine's approach. The alliance's focus shifted to analyzing how relatively inexpensive FPV drones, coupled with decoy tactics and layered defenses, could halt and even destroy elite armored units. The Kharkiv ambush illustrated that static, tightly packed convoys are especially susceptible to drone attacks, particularly when those convoys are channeled into predictable routes. NATO experts highlighted the need to overhaul convoy movement doctrines, emphasizing dispersion, unpredictability, and the integration of real-time drone surveillance into every phase of deployment. The strategic implications extended beyond the battlefield. Military planners recognized that the economic calculus of warfare had fundamentally changed. The ability to inflict outsized damage with minimal resources forced a re-evaluation of procurement priorities and operational planning. For decades, armored vehicles and main battle tanks were seen as the cornerstone of ground combat power. Now, the focus was shifting toward layered counter-drone defenses, rapid detection systems, and the dispersal of high-value assets to minimize the risk of catastrophic loss from concentrated attacks. NATO exercises began to incorporate scenarios where small drone swarms targeted convoys, testing new responses and refining the balance between mobility and protection. The repercussions for Russia were immediate and severe. The loss of over 40 armored vehicles and the casualties suffered by the 4th Guards Tank Division represented more than a temporary setback. Global sanctions have throttled Russia's ability to rebuild lost T-80 stocks quickly, adding urgency to NATO's reassessment. The depletion of experienced personnel and advanced equipment created a gap that could not be filled by simply mobilizing reserves. Russian commanders were forced to reconsider established tactics, while the psychological impact of the ambush rippled through the ranks. Reports from the front indicated increased caution among Russian armored units, with some avoiding routes that appeared vulnerable to similar traps, and others hesitating to commit forces without assurances of air defense cover. Ukraine's technological response further shifted the balance. The rapid scaling of domestic drone production, from 20,000 to over 200,000 units per month in a single year, demonstrated how quickly a nation could adapt to new forms of warfare. This surge in output was not just a matter of numbers. It reflected a broader shift toward integrating drones into every level of military operations. Ukrainian forces began to construct a drone wall along key sectors, using persistent aerial surveillance and strike capabilities to blunt Russian advances. The accessibility and versatility of these platforms meant that even modestly equipped units could pose a significant threat to traditional armored formations. The impact of the Kharkiv ambush extended to military industries and policy circles around the world. Nations observed how Ukraine's approach leveraged low-cost innovation to offset conventional disadvantages. Defense ministries re-examined their own force structures, with some accelerating investments in electronic warfare, counter-drone systems, and the development of autonomous platforms. The lessons from Kharkiv informed procurement decisions, training regimens, and the design of future military exercises. There was a growing recognition that the ability to rapidly adapt, to integrate new technologies and tactics in real time, was now as important as any legacy advantage in hardware or manpower. As militaries absorbed these lessons, the definition of battlefield dominance began to shift. No longer was superiority measured solely by the number of tanks or the weight of armor deployed. Instead, the focus turned to intelligence, adaptability, and the capacity to disrupt an adversary's plans with minimal resources. The Kharkiv ambush became a case study in how brains, not just brawn, could determine the outcome of a modern conflict. This recalibration of doctrine and priorities set the stage for a broader transformation. The events near Kharkiv made clear that the future of warfare would be shaped not by who could field the most impressive hardware, but by who could innovate faster and exploit the smallest of advantages. Brains beat brawn. Ukraine showed that precision, deception, and drones can topple tanks designed for mass assaults. The ambush near Kharkiv wasn't just a tactical victory. It delivered a clear lesson in how modern warfare now favors small, adaptive units equipped with real-time intelligence and low-cost technology over sheer numbers and armor. This event highlighted the rising influence of asymmetric tactics, where strategic planning and rapid adaptation outweighed traditional measures of military power. This ambush isn't just history, it's a handbook for the wars to come. Subscribe to learn how small unit innovation continues to outmaneuver big armor strategies in today's conflicts.